Thank you very much. We are now going to invite Kathleen Kirgin, who's joining us from New Zealand. She's a depth psychologist, international leadership consultant, and educator. She earned her Bachelor of Arts from Loyola University and both her master degree and PhD from Depth Psychology Pacifica Graduate Institute. Her doctoral research examines cultural trauma and transgenerational wounding with particular focus on Irish culture and its processes of collective transformation and healing. In addition to her private practice, Dr. Kurgan serves as an adjunct professor at Pacifica Graduate Institute and is a member of the steering committee for the analysis and activism movement. Welcome, Kathleen.
Ipek, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. It's truly an honor. I wanted to talk today about, excuse me, my personal experience as a depth psychologist with carrying depth psychology out into the field, as they say, as a non-clinician, and also some thoughts on its limitations and potential value when it comes to serving the greater world. For my doctorate, I researched cultural trauma and the cultural complexes of Ireland. I applied Tom Singer and Samuel Kimball's incredibly important cultural complex theory for the lens of my work, researching Ireland's inner sociology, the layers of its culture, its history, its literature, its art, mythology, religion, and politics. I also examined the effect of the country's partition, which happened in 1921. My family was involved in Northern Ireland politics in the 1980s and the 1990s. My father moved to Donegal in the north of Ireland during a war called the Troubles, which many of you know was a war between the Catholic Republicans and the Protestant Unionists, also known as the Loyalists, who were and are loyal to England. My father became acquainted with the leadership of the Sinn Féin political party, the Irish Republican political party, and our family got to know many of the politicians at the time. Since 2017, I have traveled to Northern Ireland for my research to interview past and current politicians from the two divided communities about their experience with the conflict, their insights of the historical trauma at the core of the Irish culture, and what it took to finally come to a long-lasting peace agreement in that region. I also interviewed several families affected by the conflict from both communities and how the conflict still affects them today. Utilizing the cultural complex theory as my lens was critical for my research, and I was able to locate cultural complexes within the Irish culture and track an arc of a transformational process that took place, a healing of some kind of these deep-seated complexes. The limitations of my research arose during the initial interviewing process, when asked by the people about the viewpoint or angle I was using for my research. I talked about depth psychology to hardened politicians and used words like complexes, the shadow, and the unconscious. And I may have even mentioned the transcendent function. And although I defined them well, I was met with blank stares, some chuckles, some nervousness, and I felt a bit of a wall between us. I'm sure they felt judged or analyzed. And as an Irish American, there was surely a cultural complex activated between us. I was also asking questions about a devastating war and deeply embedded historical and cultural trauma, speaking with individuals and communities who, in many cases, continue to carry the wounds of this conflict. Their silence humbled me. I began to question my motive of even conducting these interviews. Was I mining trauma, cultural trauma, for my own research? And isn't that in of itself narcissistic? I wanted to share the value of depth psychology with them. Instead, I felt I was alienating the people I deeply respected. Over the years, my interviews have evolved to more personal narratives. My questions are few. Ironically, when I let go of highlighting depth psychology to them, depth psychology was incredibly present in the room. Stories emerged about intergenerational trauma cycling through their families for decades. Stories of psychological scars left from the division of the North that still remain. Personal stories from young people dreaming of a conflict they weren't even a part of. The most recent stories I have heard describe a desire to unify the country, not just from Irish Republicans, but from the young people from both communities. They have also shared quite enthusiastically how art and music have become the new battlefield where the two communities meet, mostly young people. But now they sing or rap through their differences, which is quite extraordinary. There are also stories about the commitment to peace in the region. One politician claimed that the sustained peace that exists today lives within the imagination of both the Republicans and the Unionists. He quoted Yeats saying, "The imaginal life of a culture is not incidental. It is where the future is formed and where our responsibility to one another begins." I'm one to believe there should be a depth psychologist in every sphere of leadership, on government cabinets, within councils of ministers and executive bodies, in boardrooms and in local governments and within communities. And depth psychologists are really doing important work out in the public. My colleagues Monse Sfara from Slovenia and Chiara Capri from Italy are working with people and communities who have experienced war, were displaced or exiled from their homeland, as well as many other people and groups associated with depth psychology around the world. I'm returning to Ireland soon to learn more from several peace-building organizations and promote continued peace and reconciliation in the region. But maybe the greatest limitation when it comes to depth psychology and what it can contribute out in the world is time. It's hard to get ahead of the political inferno that is happening globally right now. Politics, by its very nature, is divisive, and we live in a polarized and politically reactive world. And it would seem that depth psychology could be or should be a part of the medicine at this time. Depth psychology would most certainly provide a container for people to really feel into and connect to what is happening in the world, beyond the diversions and the distractions, and help with a deeper conversation about the challenges we are all living through. I wonder if our power out in the collective as depth psychologists and activists is to not offer solutions, but instead in helping to ask the right questions, the deeper questions that feel vital at this moment, to help spark perhaps a different path for humanity. As the pain in our communities and nations increase and seem to get closer and closer to a tipping point, depth psychology has the ability to help us address these darker psychic realities together, and perhaps collectively imagine, as Yeats suggests, a different kind of future for the world than the one that seems to be taking shape right now. Thank you.